Welcome, Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Vikings on SI. Jonathan Harrison here, joined alongside Will Ragatz for a little bit of Vikings on SI coverage here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. A little trade deadline day reaction coverage here. Will Ragatz, not the election day coverage. I know we both got our stickers on, and I know that's the flavor of the day right now. But in the NFL world, the trade deadline has passed. The Vikings chose to stand pat at the deadline. So there are only two moves this season, which breaks with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's tradition in his 2 years here. So far, we're just Cam Akers and Cam Robinson. What are your thoughts of the Vikings not making a move at the trade deadline?
I think it is kind of important for context that trades don't happen, constantly. There aren't a ton of them in totality before the deadline. I think I saw the number was 18 players were moved before today's deadline, and the Vikings had two of those. I think they were one of maybe three or four teams that had two moves. They get Cam Akers to upgrade the number two running back position, which, if Sunday night against the Colts is any indication, he certainly does that over Ty Chandler. They go out and make an aggressive move to get Cam Robinson when Christian Darrisaw goes down, instead of just um, sitting around and going with David Questenberry or Blake Brandel or whoever it would have been. So they did do some moves, but even still, I agree that it was a little bit surprising that today came and went, yesterday, and the Vikings didn't do anything on the defensive side of the ball. Because, as we know, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has not been shy about making trades. We know that this defense is really good already. They are number one in the league in DVOA. I don't think they ever left that number one spot, even during the Rams and Lions little downward skid for two games. But they're 6-2. The defense is great, but there are still some areas that we've talked about: defensive tackle, cornerback, a few others, if you want to make those cases, where they could have maybe brought in some upgrades and shored up some things and kind of improved their ceiling as they look to really be a legitimate contender this year. So again, I mean, it's tough because, a as we've also discussed, they don't have a lot of draft picks, so that just makes it kind of difficult right away. And then I said this in a story on Vikings on SI. Like, it's not a Madden franchise mode. You don't know what offers were out there, what calls Kwesi made, what calls were made to him. They're not going to trade just for the sake of trading. It has to be the right value, the right deal, both to make sense both for this year and in the general timeline looking ahead. Um, and ultimately, it didn't happen. Nothing happened today on the defensive side, so they're gonna move forward with what they've got, and what they've got so far has been good enough for 6-2 and the best defense in the league. So we'll see. I mean, as always, big picture, where it's going to come down to kind of Sam Darnold to determine their ceiling. But yeah, I would say overall, a bit surprising that the Vikings didn't do anything today.
What do you think this says about how they feel about their team at 6-2, getting the win on Sunday, ending the two-game losing streak? What do you think not making a move at the deadline, not shoring up maybe some cornerback issues or some interior defensive line issues? What do you think this says about how they feel internally about this team going into the rest of the season at 6-2?
Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily has to say anything about how they feel, but it might. It might be that they've looked at this team, and as good as they've been at 6-2, um, they've seen some of the defensive issues that happened against the Lions and the Rams. They've seen some of the turnover issues with Darnold, specifically in that Colts game, and they've thought, I don't know, maybe this isn't the year to go all in and further deplete our already depleted stash of draft picks. Let's just, unless we get the right deal that makes sense, let's just play this thing out and see where it goes. And I still think, the ceiling can be pretty high this year if Darnold is able to avoid some of the mistakes and play good football because of the coaching that they have and because of the talent that they have. And you get TJ Hawkinson back from injury, and that's kind of like a trade deadline boost. Obviously, they brought in Akers and Robinson. Maybe Dallas Turner after his game against the Colts, if he's able to kind of settle into a 20-30 snap role in the second half and continue to ascend, that could be a slight difference maker for the defense. But yeah, it's a good question. I would love to just have been a fly on the wall and the conversations and all the phone calls Quasey's making, and the internal front office discussions with the Vikings, because there's such a balance there between knowing that this team is really good and has a chance to be really good, and wanting to give them the kind of maximize their ability to be very good, which is what they did with Cam Robinson. But also knowing the window coming into this season still looked to be starting in 2025 when JJ McCarthy went down, and to some degree that may still be the case, with what the Vikings think McCarthy can be, with getting Kirk Cousins dead cap hit off the books and having all that cap space, and so there's just a balance there. And I think it was always going to be really surprising if they went out and made some massive splash, like I know fans are always hoping for, and Dexter Lawrence or Jeffrey Simmons or Marshawn Lattimore. Um, but to not see them make kind of a minor move to do something at like defensive tackle, that was a little bit interesting to me.
Are you saying the NBA has kind of ruined sports fans' expectations for trade deadlines across all sports?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, the NBA is always pretty crazy.
Uh,
And this was a decent one. I mean,
yeah,
today alone, Zadarius Smith and Marshawn Lattimore and a few others that I'm probably not thinking of, and I mean all the receivers over the past few weeks, Hopkins and Amari Cooper and guys like that who have been traded. There's been some big names on the move, but yeah, the NFL usually isn't a league where there are those massive splashes.
yeah, for sure. You mentioned some of those guys that got traded. A lot of teams, a couple teams in the NFC making moves. You mentioned the Lions going to get Zadarius Smith, the Commanders going to get Marshawn Lattimore. With those teams clearly stockpiling talent and getting talent to add to their already good teams, what is that? Where does that leave the Vikings in the race for the NFC? I know they're already behind the Lions, which are clearly the class of the entire conference. Where do you think the Vikings stand after trade deadline day and some of these other teams making moves in the conference?
I think they're still right there. Yeah, the Lions are pretty clearly the best team in the NFC, and I would say the best team in the league right now. I know Kansas City is the defending two-time champs, and they haven't lost a game in a really long time. They're 8-0, but I mean the Lions' advanced numbers and just what they've done week in and week out, how convincingly they're beating teams. They look like the best team in the league to me. For them to go get Zadarius Smith after losing Aiden Hutchinson, who had been having an unbelievable season, it's similar to what the Vikings did, where you know Darisaw and Aiden Hutchinson are in that elite class of players. But Zadarius Smith is kind of Cam Robinson-esque. He's probably better than Cam Robinson comparatively, with what he's done this season and in the past. But yeah, you gotta be able to fill those holes when you're a contender, and the Lions did that. Um, Again, though, the Vikings a couple weeks ago, very winnable game at home against that Detroit Lions team. A play here, a play there. They might have been walking out of that stadium 6-0, and I don't know if that probably doesn't change anything about the way the Rams game goes 4 days later, but who knows? The Commanders are a fascinating one because nobody thought they would be here this quickly, and Jaden Daniels has just been unbelievable, and that team has looked really good, and I like it to recognize as their front office recognize that hey, the window's here. Daniels is good right now on his rookie contract. The rest of our division, the Cowboys and the Eagles, who are usually so solid, are kind of down. Although I think the Eagles are still going to be a factor. Cowboys without Dak are pretty much toast. So they recognize let's do it. Let's go get a Marshawn Lattimore. I like that aggressiveness. And I think they're going to be a factor because the path is there for them to win that division and be the 2 or 3 seed or whatever it might be. I think you look at the Packers still being in the mix, and that was a tough loss for them at rainy Lambeau Field against the Lions. I think the Falcons are in the mix. I think there's a few other teams there. The Seahawks, the 49ers, the Cardinals, all in the NFC West can kind of talk themselves into it. And I think they all made minor moves to get better before the deadline. But the Vikings are right there. They're right there. This team is 6-2. There's a real chance that they're 9-2 3 weeks from now. I know it's 3 straight road games, but if they play the way they're able to play, I don't think they should lose to the Jaguars, the Titans, or the Bears, quite frankly. And yeah, they're going to be right in the mix. And the talent, the coaching, it's all there. It's just going to come down to making some adjustments, getting a little bit more consistency maybe from the defense, which again is crazy to say when they're number one in the league in DVOA. But you get Blake Cashman back. I think that should help a little bit with some of those kind of intermediate routes over the middle of the field that have seemed to be open a lot. And then offensively, if they can protect Sam Darnold and just keep him from as much as they can, try to keep him from making those just boneheaded mistakes, which we saw a couple of against the Colts. I think they still have a chance to be really good, which again comes back to why I thought they might make one more move somewhere here to patch things up as they move into the second half.
And then lastly, with Vikings fans not getting the move that they may have wanted, looking at the waiver wire, some of the guys that were waived today, or maybe free agents that are still sitting out there, is there anybody that the Vikings can add, or is that just kind of an area where they're probably not going to look at this point in the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always look at that. Today's news was mostly that Will Ragatz and Andrew DePaula, 2 of their 3 specialists, are going on injured reserve. They signed a new kicker, John Parker Romo, who was here in the offseason. They signed a new long snapper, who's a former Pro Bowler with the Rams. And then one name I would just maybe throw out there is the Browns released defensive tackle Quentin Jefferson, who was a 31-year-old journeyman. He had 6 sacks last year. He had 5.5 the year before that. Kind of a situational pass rusher. He's not much of a run stopper, but somebody who could theoretically fit into this Vikings defense. I just, you look at the PFF grades, and Jonathan Bullard he's dead last out of all defensive tackles in pass rush grade. But I don't know. I don't know how much that matters to the Vikings. Like, I think they're content to have him be a run stuffer, him and Harrison Phillips, and then mostly try to generate pressure from the edges. And Grenard's having an unbelievable season, and Ben Ginkel's playing well, and maybe we see more Dallas Turner. But it just I've been thinking a lot about how great this defense could look if they were able to have someone in there who can stop the run at defensive tackle and rush the passer. If they could magically get, like Christian Wilkins, who Brian Flores had in Miami, is such a perfect example. There was all the buzz about him in free agency, and then he signed a big deal with the Raiders. But somebody like that would just take this defense to another level, or a shutdown corner, or something along those lines. But I do think, for perspective, this has still been so far the best defense in the league. They have a lot of really good pieces at edge rusher, at linebacker, at safety, and Flores, scheming the whole thing and learning ideally from what's happened the past few weeks, or specifically the Lions and Rams games. I still think this defense is going to be quite good.
Yeah, it should be fun to watch down the stretch here. Vikings at 6-2. Go read all of Will's work over at Vikings, Twins, Timberwolves, Gophers, and Badgers on SI, covering it all for you across Minnesota and part of Wisconsin sports as well. And we will be back tomorrow, once again, with another video across Minnesota sports. Hit subscribe, does help us get found. Also helps you get notified every time we post a new video here over at Bring Me the Sports. We'll talk to you tomorrow.